Hi there. Welcome. Welcome to the Philanthropic Planner program. I'm glad you joined us. Philanthropic Planner, we've been around for a number of years now. I think we're in the 9th year. And we try to talk about philanthropy, that boring subject, but we think it's important because it's important to the community and it's important to everything around us. We take it for granted, I think, a lot, but it's designed to provide a friendly forum, if you will, and we promote dialogue about philanthropy to share with you what other people are doing, and maybe you can relate to some of their stories and strategies and what they do. You don't have to be a multimillionaire to be a philanthropist. There are a lot of different forms of philanthropy, and certainly volunteerism is one of those. But we want to simplify the complexity of philanthropy. We don't have, and we don't like to talk about a lot of legalese terms, but we do talk about wills and bequests and that type of thing. But it's designed for you and me as philanthropists, however we do that. Also designed a little bit for planners, be it life insurance professionals, financial planners, attorneys, accountants, trust officers. And I know some of them watch every once in a while, flipping through channels and saying, "Oh, I saw you on TV." They want to check and see if I'm telling the truth. So I know there are a few planners out there that watch once in a while. So I'd like to welcome you again, and let's talk about philanthropy. The social aspect of it is we talk about voluntary and involuntary taxes, and if I can direct some of my tax dollars to where I want the dollars to go, we talk about social capital in that context. I mentioned wills and bequests. We received a card here several weeks ago from a lady that thanked us for talking about reviewing her legal documents, her will, and she changed the provision of her charitable bequests from a dollar amount to a percentage of her estate. And she was excited about that, excited about reviewing and updating her will. So let's talk about philanthropy in a lot of different ways. Locally, we usually start about talking about local news, and I'd like to share with you some things that are happening locally. We have Knit a Hug. I think they have a program, and I think it's a store, if I'm not mistaken, Knits and Pearls, just down the street in Avon, and they sponsored a Knit a Hug. And for knitters and crocheters and so on, this is a passion that they have in the term of prayers and that type of thing. But they knit prayer shawls, shawlettes, caps and booties for young kids with cancer and so on. They donate these things to Helen and Harry Gray's Cancer Center, to Yukon Medical, and to the Children's Medical Center. So locally, we see things like that where people are volunteering their time. They're knitting and crocheting these things for people that really need some prayers and passion and so on. Also locally, I noted in the paper when I got back from a trip that Simsbury Bank had donated to Simsbury Public Library $2,500, and things like that are happening every day. We see that in local papers, and we kind of take that for granted. We see a picture of a representative handing a check to a charity. And things like this need a token of thanks, and we thank Simsbury Bank for their gift to the public library. I'd also like to note locally that a volunteer that we've known for a long time who devotes a lot of time to volunteering in different ways. But I noted that Charity Folk, after leading Simsbury Chamber of Commerce, has announced her retirement, and we'd like to wish her the best in her retirement. But I think Charity's a good example of someone that has volunteered their time in the past, and I thought we'd recognize her efforts. Also locally, annually, and again in the papers, page after page of running and biking fundraising events for various charities, and these events locally, the river marathons, half marathon and run, biking and walking for charity. Also an event coming up for the Flower Bridge to raise some money for their efforts in maintaining and upkeeping the Flower Bridge, which is a nice asset of the community. So locally, that's kind of where we are, and we'll move on to the state of Connecticut. There's a Run the Torch, a torch run, which is a 3-day event. I believe it's over 530 miles or something like that. But there are 1,500 law enforcement personnel and Special Olympic athletes that are taking part in this 3-day run of the torch. And they will go through 100 towns and cities in Connecticut over this 500-mile trek, and end up at Southern Connecticut University in New Haven. And like I say, this is an annual event. And the reason I mention Special Olympics is not just this event because it's not geared to raising money, but it raises our consciousness and our awareness of Special Olympics and the efforts that this event and a lot of volunteers helping these Special Olympic athletes doing their best. It's not a case of winning, but doing their best in these events. Nationally, I started with the Chronicle of Philanthropy, which I usually do, and I don't know if you could see that, but online giving is up. Now, this entire issue of the Chronicle of Philanthropy is talking about the increase of online giving and how the digital process is really making inroads. And honestly, I'm astounded by some of these figures. On charities, it wasn't too long ago, we talked about using online like PayPal and things like that, where the charities started to see that, gee, this charity is doing this, and for $8.50 a month, automatically taking out of your account or what have you, that gradually this has grown, and it's really become a big thing in raising dollars. For example, if you look at some of the universities, Ohio State University, over $10 million raised online. We couldn't talk about the Ohio State University unless we talked about the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, $13 million raised. Several of the universities in California raising over that $10 million figure. So it is getting traction. It's resonating with donors that this is an easy, convenient, in some cases anonymously, but gifting, and in this case, some major dollars. But here's where I look at the $10 million total, that if you have a constituency like some of these universities, you have an alumni force of 100, 150, 200,000 living alumni. And each of them get into, I mentioned $8.50 a month for $100 a year or something like that, but you start to use the numbers and multiply that. It doesn't take a lot of money out of my cash flow to participate in that large event. Now, $10 million to some of these universities that have billion-dollar campaigns doesn't seem like much, but it really is a lesson for other charities that, gee, this is a means of offering a way for people to conveniently donate to the charity. Now, here's another one. I talked about 10 million, but how about one that really stood out, the National Christian Foundation, $40 million. Then you've got California Community Foundation, $95 million. So it really is becoming a method of raising money, maybe for operational budget and so on. It's I think resonating with a lot of donors. So nationally, I thought I'd talk about that. Now, when we talk about these programs, those of you who have been suffering watching some of this craziness, you know that I have difficulty with a title or a theme or what have you to present Philanthropy Today and the Philanthropic Planners. But I will have to admit that today, and this program is a little bit different than in the past. The title today is Volunteer of the Year. The nominations are in. I can't say that they're closed, but the Volunteer for the Year, this is philanthropy at its best. And I thought we'd devote this program, other programs we talk about philanthropy obviously, but I thought we'd devote the next 10 or 15 minutes to the Volunteer of the Year. Now, we look to serve others, and perhaps we don't have a lot of discretionary money that on a cash flow basis. We're concerned about our basic standard of living. We're concerned about the future. Do we have the capacity to give monetarily, and not just today, but in the future? So capacity to give is a very important issue for planners to assist their clients in such a way to do some projections in the future, look at inflation and taxes and issues like future health care costs, or maybe needing some future care, long-term care, and so on. So it's not just capacity today, but capacity in the future, and can I outlive my nest egg kind of thing. So volunteering is a big part of that formula, or as we walk through the probability of being able to raise some money on the charity side. So the Volunteer of the Year, let's talk about that person. When we talk about running and walking and swimming and raising money in events, when this particular volunteer has done all of those things. And I remember when this volunteer was about 71 years old, and she contacted her friends, her neighbors, her family, and said, we're trying to raise money for leukemia. So here's this leukemia swim-a-thon to raise money for leukemia in southwest central Florida. And like a lot of these events, it's can you donate X for laps or miles or something like that. So this particular event, this volunteer solicited funds per lap in swimming. Now, at 71, this might be a good time for me to say that, to interject here, that I was one of the people that was called to maybe be a donor or what have you for this participant in this swimathon. So maybe I was a little foolish, thinking how far is this 71-year-old volunteer going to swim? And I foolishly said, okay, $1 a lap. I mean, how much harm can that be? So the person swims 200 laps. And I received a phone call saying, hooray, I did the whole 200 laps. You can send your check to Leukemia Swimathon. Well, that was kind of fun. The next year, about the same time, I received another phone call, and I can share with you that my brother was also contacted, and would he be willing to donate per lap? And maybe he's more foolish than I was. He said, oh yes, I'll do that. And I would like to swim also. So he contacted his friends and neighbors and so on, and said, I'm swimming in this Leukemia Swimathon, and maybe we can raise some money. So here is my brother. I guess you read it already, that this particular volunteer is my mother. And my brother tells the story of swimming, and he's not a great swimmer, but he thought he'd swim 10 or 20 laps. Well, he did 20, 30 laps, and he said he was starting to get tired, and every time he'd come down and do a flip at the end of the pool to come back, he's looking over to see where this volunteer of the year is and how many laps that she's done. And about 30 or 40 laps later, he needs a breather, so he kind of dog paddles and kind of swims on his back, thinking that he'll get his second wind and maybe he can do another 5 or 10 laps. Well, he called and said he really did do 200 laps because he wasn't going to let this 72-year-old woman beat him. Now, that's only part of the story. Very quickly, he tells me about lap 140 or 150, 160, he wasn't sure. Another dog paddle event, and he's doing this back crawl of some kind, and he swears that there was a wake of water that came over and splashed on his face, and he looks over, and the 72-year-old swimmer was passing him by, and he thought he was going to drown. Well, raised a lot of money in the 2 or 3 swimathons, and I guess that kind of gives you an idea of the beginning of this story and how the Volunteer of the Year kind of comes into play. Let me interject here. I said this was kind of a first for me, that I have just returned from Florida, and I've had half a dozen or more people suggest, when I said, oh my goodness, a couple days from now, I've got a TV taping. Well, these people suggested that maybe you could talk about this volunteer. And I didn't dismiss it, but I really didn't think much about it. But a couple more people said, why don't you talk about your experience with this volunteer? So the best, philanthropy at its best, volunteering. If we move the clock calendar ahead 5 or 10 years, this 72-year-old swimmer is still working. And she's working for the city of Sarasota, and every time she had a chance, almost weekly, she'd come up with an idea that she'd share with other City of Sarasota employees and friends, that this is another way to raise some money or can goods or what have you. So she'd tie fitness in with that and recommend that the city employees at their lunch break walk down 3 or 4 blocks to the marina and do laps around the small park there, and all for raising $5, $10, $100 or $200, okay? So that kind of went on, and I don't know what happened, but she retired. And that retirement didn't last very long, because she started volunteering at age 77, 78. Started volunteering at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital. And the president of the hospital met her in the hallway one day and said, I have to talk to you. I just came from a meeting, and one of the reports on volunteers, the number of volunteers and so on, I understand that over a 2-week period that you volunteered over 90 hours. Now, most volunteers at the hospital, according to the president, said that they volunteer an average of 3 or 4 hours a week. And here's the volunteer of the year that was doing over 45 hours a week. And at that moment said that he needed to talk to her about paying her, and we need to hire her. So for the next 8 or 9 years, she worked at the hospital and finally retired from the hospital at age 86, running a department in the radiology section of the hospital. Well, that didn't stop the volunteering and didn't stop the raising the money, because she ended up volunteering in various ways in the community, and again raising money and being the recording secretary of the Sarasota Municipal Employees Retired Employees Association, 450 members or more. And at their functions would always have something about come and bring a canned good that we can give to charity. Well, that kind of takes its natural step, and at her church, she gets involved in bringing the food bank as a distributor in the church. So at food bank, every Thursday and Friday, she would devote 4 or 5 hours on Thursday, bringing in and categorizing and stacking and some of the food that's brought in. And then on Friday, organized how they would keep track of people coming in for food. And when I say organized, I mean very organized, that you could only come in for food once a month. And she was kind of a disciplinarian, and she would tell them, Carlos, you were here 2 weeks ago, you go to the end of the line. If we have enough food at the end of the day, we'll bring you in, and so on. So 5 days before she herself became a patient in a hospital, 5 days before, she is running the food bank and continuing to volunteer. Now, at the age of 93, 5 days later, she ends up in the hospital, ICU, hospice, and died a week ago. Now, we had a memorial service for this volunteer of the year just a few days ago, and people at the memorial service had an opportunity to get up and mention some of the memories that they had. And a lady at the food bank said, I don't know how we're going to replace her, and shared with the group, over 100, 110 people, that a gentleman came in the day before this memorial service, but 2 days after she had passed. And this gentleman had been a regular at the food bank once a month for almost 3 years. He had lost his job. He was a single dad raising children. And when he came in, here's somebody strange sitting at the table, screening and interviewing people who were there. He asked, where she was, and when he found out that she had passed 2 days before, this lady that was telling the story said, here's this man, broke down and sobbed and cried because she cared so much for him over this period of time, always asked about his kids, and would take him through the food bank in the kitchen to take food. So forgive me, it's a personal thing, but when this was recommended by a number of people, you should talk about volunteering and devote your program to volunteering. I thought that's a great idea. And why don't you talk about the volunteer of the year, or maybe the volunteer of the decade? And that kind of struck a seed with me. So the philanthropy at its best, volunteering, you don't have to be a multimillionaire to be a philanthropist. You can volunteer and maybe devote 3 or 4 hours of your busy schedule a week to volunteering. I'd be remiss in not saying and suggesting to you that you could also volunteer by calling the TV here, Simsbury Community TV. They need people to man the cameras. They're doing a fantastic job and doing more in the community to bring events and news to you over the 3 stations. So think about volunteering, calling Karen here at TV and say, hey, I'd like to do something for the TV in the community. Also, while we're on that subject, why don't you just take a minute and write a small check and send it to Simsbury Community TV, trying to raise some money in a campaign currently, and I am sure they would appreciate a small check from you. Think about that digital news that I was telling you about. If everybody in town sent in $10, every household in Simsbury, think of what that would do to help bring events to you, local news and that type of thing. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time. Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.